That's right. Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers. Tiki here.
And Rohith Dharr. So, Tiki, what are you doing today?
Whatever I feel like I want to do. Gosh! All right. Okay, that's right, folks. We are here. It is the Napoleon Dynamite 20th Anniversary Retrospective podcast. Rohit, I'm so excited to do this one, man. I've honestly been looking forward to for 2004, as far as the anniversaries go, it's been this and Sideways are the two that I've been most looking forward to. Sideways we'll get to in later on in the year. But yeah, Napoleon Dynamite. Rohit, I think actually on my most recent rewatch, I think I have kind of like a really good thesis statement for why this movie, in spite of it clearly being kind of like oversaturated in the pop culture landscape at the time that it came out, which I'm sure you and I will get into. It's like that oversaturation is a big part of this movie's DNA. But in spite of that, I feel like this movie kind of lives on and is like a very seminal kind of cultural touchstone, specifically because I feel like this movie is almost like the time capsule movie for that age where the internet was a thing, but social media had not fully taken over yet. And so, I feel like this movie just perfectly encapsulates that kind of like weird transition period where we had the internet, we knew the capabilities of the internet, as this movie does showcase with the La Fonda subplot, but it wasn't like the focal point of people's lives in the same way that it is now. I remember in the trailer, the whole Kip having line about like, don't be jealous with me because I've been chatting online with babes all day. Like, that line in the trailer is meant to be like, oh wow, what a weirdo. He just spends all of his time online. Like, I don't know. I feel like that kind of like pre-social media sort of vibe just permeates this movie. What do you think about that?
That's a really good observation, because I think what you're getting at, Tiki, is that Napoleon Dynamite, the way the characters are culturally, they're very much. I think you're on something about the internet, is that the internet before sort of social media is that it was sort of a weird, fun, bizarre place. I think the kind of DNA, the sensibilities of Napoleon Dynamite is so much something like Weird Al Yankovic and UHF. Like, they're this like absurd, hot, like off kilter, something that's like, like Upright Citizens Brigade, like stuff like humor and things that are just very niche, very specific to the subculture. And I think I think that's a really interesting point about like Napoleon and people in that town or that movie are kind of people that will be on the internet, but they're on the internet because they're just that kind of weirdos. And the internet hasn't just been democratized or been very made user friendly. And so the people you see like that use the internet back in that time, like the 90s, early 2000s, were like the hobbyists, the Steve Wozniaks or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they always have the pocket, like they would look like Napoleon Dynamite. And I think what's interesting is that you have that, but it's even further heightened by the fact that Napoleon Dynamite is a kid that's from Idaho, that has these very like he's almost like an alien, but he's an alien that's self-aware of human norms and social conventions, because you can clearly tell where he's like exaggerating and just putting on like, oh, I'm like this really cool badass, but there's still this sense of being aware of his limitations, especially with him being kind of bullied and having his head around the neck and all that stuff. And I think that's what makes this movie like really valuable, is that you don't have a movie that really, this isn't a movie about a realistic depiction of high school. This is just like the feeling, it's hiding the feeling that we all have of kind of being a little bit off center from everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And
Totally.
And the neat thing about the movie is that it extends to where everyone is a little off center, a little quirky, and a little out there. And so by that notion, then they're like the sense of being normal, like the Summers and the chat, like those people, they're the minority. The majority of people are quirky and weird, but they're able to have lives. And I think with the way the movie ends with like the specific like endings for each of our main characters, if anything, like these weird people can find a sense of happiness or a sense of joy and contentment that they in other movies it's like, oh, these are the people on the sidelines and the main characters are maybe more attractive or more quote unquote normal get to enjoy the happy endings. And not to say this is like a traditional happy ending, but it's more like, oh, like some things can go up for certain people, like regardless of
even Uncle Rico gets a happy ending.
Yeah, but I think his happy ending's a little out there because like it's just a random girl, like Asian girl that just bikes in and he just stops and she just comes in and it's like, okay, like I guess maybe the happy ending is that for Rico, like I think like Rico's kind of an interesting like early precursor to like quote unquote toxic masculinity or like arrested development male characters.
Oh, totally. I feel like Rohit, let's we'll break down all the characters and stuff. I want to get kind of a baseline here before we go too deep into it about just our because I wanted to set that whole like pre social media thing up as a kind of a thesis. But other than that, Rohit, just give me your overall kind of like thoughts and experiences with this movie as like looking at it from 20 years on.
It still is really funny. And the way that the movie ends, it's like, oh, that's really special. You it's like you kind of feel it's like it weirdly Napoleon Dynamite is kind of a feel good movie, but it's not like overly sentimental or raw. It's like heart is kind of just coated with a level of not irony, but just sort of more like it's like if Luna Lovegood grew up in America and made a movie, it'd be Napoleon Dynamite.
Oh my god, I love that. I love that description. That's amazing. Oh my god. Oh, I appreciate that. All right. So yeah, for me, Rohit, I didn't grow up in Idaho, but I did grow up in a town where farming was very much part of its DNA. So, we do have like a rather robust FFA scene around these parts in Petaluma. And so I did get a lot of the kind of cultural humor that this movie's going for. I do know a lot of like, eccentric, weird old farmers like that and stuff like that. And also, like you were saying, that divide in high school where, the popular, quote unquote, people are kind of the minority, but the people are still kind of trying to find themselves. And people like Napoleon are really the people that we should be looking up to as far as like, being trailblazers and not giving a crap what other people think and just really marching to the beat of their own drum. But anyways, yeah, I really, really, like I said, on top of that kind of time capsule element to this movie, I do think that from a cultural level, the fact that it was so overexposed, which we'll get into, I don't think it helped it. I think that a lot of people turned on this movie after it became, such a hyper fixation in pop culture for a while. But I mean, it was a hyper fixation for a reason, because I think this is honestly one of the most quotable movies, just as far as like, it's not just like memorable quotes, but it's straight up fun to say the quotes with the Napoleon inflection, like, Tina, you fat piece of lard, come get some dinner, just like
nunchuck skills.
Hunting skills, computer hacking skills. Girls only want boyfriends who have great skills. So it's just that, like, I feel like just John Heder just truly gave birth to an iconic character, like on the same level as, like Jack Sparrow, another character who was equally as overexposed in pop culture. But Jack Sparrow was 2003, Napoleon Dynamite was 2004. Borat was 2005. I feel like that kind of like mid 2000s era was kind of like a golden age for like original cinematic characters that just leapt off the screen. And Rohit, I will say I did go through a phase where I was watching this movie like twice a day. It didn't last very long, but it was just like very much a comfort movie for me once it came out on DVD. I just really got into the vibe of it. So,
no, and I can understand why it became a comfort movie, because even though it's not a very glamour, like it's based in Idaho. It's not a very glamorous movie or environment, but there's just something kind of like cozy and just like there's like a sense of like, oh, like this is a place I can imagine being real, and these kind of people, even they're slightly exaggerated, there are kind of interesting personalities you kind of see if you were to go through the road, especially in Idaho. So I think that is something. It's like, oh, like there's just something that you get endeared to. So I can definitely understand why that would be a comfort movie.
Totally. And I think a big part of it does have to do with what you said about the ending, because I really do think that ending just, everything from the standing ovation all the way up to the tetherball scene is just like a perfect encapsulation of like that sort of cathartic, like, like you march to the beat of your own drum and you get rewarded for it. That kind of like celebration of being.
But it isn't like overdone in the way that I think certain other like lesser movies. It's like you don't have like the sort of music, you don't have like the close up, you don't have like the needle drop or anything like that.
You've got that violin music, which I think is incredible.
Yeah, but it just kind of is. It's just more. Hey, something came up, something good happened to them. And they're just kind of living the moment. And I think that's just kind of the whole thing. It's like for people that aren't part of the norm or kind of feel out of sync with society, there are just certain times at which things can look up for them. Mm-hmm. And it's all just about just taking the moment and just riding with it. And I think that's kind of where for characters like Napoleon, that's sort of a level of aspiration on the part of people. It's like, hey, like maybe I want to, get like the happy ending or like the, like the center of attention. But just there's some days in which it's like, oh, like what I got something nice. And I think that's kind of like the small victories or just small intimate moments. I think that's what makes like the happy ending in Napoleon works, because it's a bunch of small things. It's not like a grandiose, like,
yeah, totally.
Or like Napoleon becomes president, or like the pop brigade. He's just like, oh, like there's something that he's wanted, but never know how the means to express it. But through Napoleon doing something right, even if it's not something grandiose, heroic, he's doing his Napoleon way. It works out to where he and Debbie are kind of a thing.
I feel like in a lesser movie, his big dance would have come like at the midway point, and that would have caused a conflict. Like, oh boy, now Napoleon's popular now, and how is he going to navigate his relationship with Deb and Pedro? Because all the people want him now. Yeah, I don't know, but
or like even if it's not a lesser movie, like I consider there could have been a draft or a version of the story where it's like, oh, Pedro doesn't win, and it's like, oh, we didn't win, but we still have each other. And I think that would have, like, that's like a message I think can often be overplayed. It's like, oh, you're not part of society, but hey, you have other misfits and you're part of an island of misfit toys. If anything, it's about like, hey, everyone's a misfit. And there will be some days that you're not on top of the world, but there'll be some days you're on top of a hill. And I think that's kind of where I appreciate this movie. It's like, this is kind of a snapshot of a people. There's no like arc from going from year to year or there's like any big life lessons. It's about people.
I mean, the main subplot with the vote for Pedro stuff kicks in about halfway through the movie. It's a very it's almost kind of like a Richard Linklater kind of structure to it. It's
episodic,
Yeah.
But they're more,
All right, just to address a couple comments here, we have Little Blue. He says a couple months ago, here in West Virginia, there was a screening of this movie with the cast and film there, with the cast of the film there for a panel. That would have been great. I would have loved to see that. Especially because I feel like all of the cast in this movie, besides maybe Diedrich Bader, they are pretty much just like, they live in these characters. It's like they really, with all due respect to them, they really haven't done much else. John Heder tried, but for better or for worse, they are these people, Mm-hmm. Anyways, Kogia says, I saw Napoleon once and thought it was okay. It's amusing enough for what it is. What's interesting is that I forgot to kind of bring this up. The first time I saw this movie in theaters, I honestly didn't really know what to make of it. It was honestly like a level of awkward that I had never seen in a movie before, and it was hard to wrap my head around. And it was only on repeat viewings that I was like, oh, I totally get what this movie's going for. Like, this movie's glorious specifically because of how uniquely awkward it is.
I think, I mean, I'm guessing here, but I think why maybe you didn't click with the movie initially is because I think as like people that watch movies growing up, we're kind of trained that if there's awkward person or persons, there's always a straight man or like a normal people to bounce off or react to. Whereas in this movie,
there's really not. Yeah.
So you're just kind of marinating and just like just bizarre people bouncing out one another.
I think that's a good point. I think you're probably right to some extent. Yeah, because even like I would say Deb is probably like the most straight man character in the story, but even she's definitely got her quirkiness to her in a lot of ways. So yeah, I feel like this discussion is going to kind of go all over the place, but let's just bounce around a little bit. So speaking of Diedrich Bader, just to bring him up because he is a very memorable but very brief part. He shot his scenes all in one day, so that's why he's really only in the one scene and then the one quick kind of like follow up to that with Starla. But what do you think of Rex Kwon Do just as a kind of like a presence in this film?
I didn't realize that was Diedrich Bader until my recent rewatch. It's like, oh, this voice, oh. And it's like, oh, that is perfect casting. Like with what the character is, it's like, yeah, you couldn't have any other person besides Diedrich Bader because he has that specific like vocal cadence and flexion.
Right.
Make him like a very loud, like larger than life or even louder than life personality. So
you think anyone wants a roundhouse kick to the face while I'm wearing these bad boys? Forget about it.
Honestly, like for as much as this movie is constantly memed and quoted and referenced, it's surprising that not many people like have referenced or used like the iconography of like Rex Kwon Do like outfit like as often as like because like for me in terms of like for like say Halloween,
Rex Kwon Do is a pretty iconic costume within the fabric of this movie. Yeah.
Well, no, but yeah, it's kind of weird to see it not see it as often as say like Napoleon is vote for Pedro shirt.
The vote for Pedro shirt is a classic for sure.
Yeah. Or even like Pedro and his like outfit and getup, like post his like buzzing off his hair.
Mm-hmm.
That was a part I forgot. I think I forgot about was that I for a long while I think my like cultural memory was that was just his hair. It was just kind of styled weirdly. It's like, oh, that's a wig. That's like,
right. All right, so yeah, I feel like this movie it's got a couple different kind of directions. I think the way that it just starts out with kind of showing Napoleon's day-to-day high school routine is really fun. One of my favorite exchanges is early on with Dawn over the tots. Come on, Napoleon, give me some of your tots.
Yeah, and he just kicks them when he doesn't get it.
I don't know, just like stuff like that, Dawn I've always appreciated is like I feel like as a bully character, he kind of he's not that harsh. That's kind of what I like about him. He's a jerk, but he's not like a Hollywood jerk, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
He's not like a psychopath, like a bully in an 80s movie. Holy shit.
Right, exactly.
Which I think because I think the movie is really it's a very low stakes movie. And I think that's part of the fun and comfort of it is that there's nothing like really life threatening or like for certain teen movies, it's like, oh, I have to get to college. I have to get to this specific college. Like, oh, I have to get to this party. Where it's like, there's no like, I have to do big thing. It's like, oh, these are just day to day,
The election is pretty much it. And even that, it's like we clearly get the sense that if Pedro doesn't win, it's really not going to be that big of a deal for him.
Yeah.
What do you think of Pedro being introduced as the new student? Because one thing that is interesting is that I did go back and watch the short film that this was based on, and they had Pedro, it was Pedro, but it wasn't like Pedro as is, like, it's a very much a different incarnation of the character, and also another cousin of Pedro's. And they're all kind of like friends with Napoleon from the jump. Like, I feel like introducing Pedro as like the new kid kind of gives them a realistic kind of window into their friendship, you know, from the jump, pun intended, because of the bike scene.
Yeah, I think also because I think part of the genius of having Pedro be kind of the new student at the school is that Napoleon is an outsider by most conventions, but by having Pedro, he can be he can be sort of a quote unquote insider and be kind of like that doesn't really do exposition, but in terms of like as Pedro's kind of being encultured or brought into sort of the world that's the town that's the small town in Idaho, Napoleon's world, like we're in Pedro's shoes, you know, just kind of taking in like the ambiance and all that stuff.
I didn't even think about it like that, but you're right. If anything, Pedro is kind of like the closest that we get to an audience surrogate character, which is interesting.
Yeah, and I think because the way he doesn't really talk as much. It's like, yeah, sure. It's like very one. It almost feels like he's kind of like a video game, like Link.
Right.
He's a little bit more vocal.
Okay, but like, I guess I'll run for president now. I guess if it'll keep the plot going.
Yeah, and I think if anything, he's not like a straight man, but he's sort of more like beige. He's like a beige man. You have like the more like rainbow colored, like just bonkers people kind of just bouncing off of him. Even though he's weird, but he's just more like weird on a 1, whereas everyone else is a weird on a 10 or 11.
Exactly, yeah. One of the big things I appreciate this movie, and honestly, one of the most wholesome elements of it for me, is just the presence of Pedro's cousins.
What actually is really funny about it is that I kind of appreciate that, like, it's not like, I think because they didn't want to repeat what was being done with Kip and LaFonda. It's like, didn't have the thing. It's like, oh, white nerdy guy interacts with minority people, and then he does ingratiate himself to the minority by doing minority thing, and it's like, oh, you're cool, white boy, or something. Like Napoleon was just still being Napoleon, and these dudes just like they didn't even talk much. They're just like silently helping Napoleon like go to the prom.
But you do get the sense, especially at the end, and honestly, like I my heart just I have like a Grinch like heart growing 10 sizes moment every time I see them just proudly pat Pedro on the back during his celebration picnic. Yeah. It's like, you know, it's like because they're out doing their own thing, they clearly don't. I mean, honestly, let's be real here. If Napoleon and Pedro don't fit into this Idaho setting, they probably don't fit in even more so. You know what I mean? They're probably even bigger fish out of water in their own right. And so I really do like that they have this whole like, you know, thing going on where they really do just respect the heck out of their cousin and are proud of their cousin. It's just very charming and sweet, and just another like really likable element to this movie.
Yeah, there's a level of sincerity to most of the people. There, it's like even for the people that put on like big like facades, there's not like a sense of malice or a sense of like melancholy or sadness. They're just kind of people. You know how like there's certain, let's say like, you know, like when you're growing up in school, there's certain people that kind of act a certain way, and sometimes they can be insecure about it, but sometimes they're just kids just trying to do a bit or just trying to be something, and there's kind of a fun, you know, there's an element of play to it, if you get what I mean.
Sure, yeah. Okay, we should probably wrap around to the well, I guess, do we have anything more to say about just, because it is just obviously a pretty towering element of this movie, just John Heater's performance just as a whole, his presence, his demeanor, his cadence. I mean, I feel like it's a titan of a film performance, right? Like it's just iconic. I would dare to say it's probably one of the most iconic film performances of the last 20 years.
It's just a demeanor, like not just the way he stands and walks, the way he just runs. He does look kind of like a Naruto run, but just like without his arms stretched out, he just kind of just lurches his top part of his back as he's moving forward. And I love this. I think what I love is just like he's in Rico's car as Rico's like entertaining a client, and he decides to just bolt. And
right.
And I love sort of the just. I really am curious, like how much the look of Napoleon was realized on a script level versus just like when the movie's being made, like costume designers just went through so many permutations of the Napoleon Dynamite look.
I mean, if you watch the short film, like it's pretty much on point. His name is Seth in the short film, but like the cadence, the afro, the glasses, the teeth, it's all there.
Oh, interesting. Man, going from Seth to Napoleon is such a like step up because I think the name Napoleon Dynamite is such a like great name.
They even have that same line that I referenced, right at the beginning of the short, like, what are you going to do today, Seth? And it's like, it just doesn't hit the same, It just doesn't
I think Seth is like a normal person name. Like, do you get what I mean? Whereas Napoleon, it's like, God, any kid that whose first name is Napoleon, it's like, he might, if like this movie came out like, say, 40, 50 years ago, the kid would have been called like Hannibal Jones or something like that.
Right.
And I think just like it is kind of here's the what works about this is that like in any sort of modern movie nowadays, it's like how there's gonna be bits like, wait, that's your name, and then they'll have like a back and forth about like how.
Oh God, I hate that. Ugh, that's a big movie pet peeve of mine nowadays.
Yeah, because at a certain point, it's like, okay, it's cute once in a while, but not only is it overused, but the more you think about it, it's like, is really the joke of it is just that it's dumb.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there could be more that's entertaining in terms of just like rhyme schemes, in terms of puns, or just, I think and I could probably agree to a certain extent. It's like, okay, like, oh, this thing is just outlandish or out there. We're going to make fun of it. And it's like, okay, at a certain point, I think there's something that's like, sometimes you can be insincere by trying to be too self-effacing.
Sure. All right. So yeah, let's talk about the rest of the Dynamite family. Kip is just so lovable, man. Is he not?
Kip is just like it's like, God, if Napoleon Dynamite came out nowadays, Kip would be the poster boy for like quote unquote soy boys or whatever. But Kip is just
know what? I feel like Kip's whole arc in this movie is very much mirrored to Napoleon's, where this is a man who knows who he is. He knows he's kind of a dweeb. He knows he's, like a terminally online person back when terminally online wasn't just like the normal operating mode for most people. And yet he still plows forward with it, and he still finds like the love of his life in a very unconventional way. But I don't know, man, all those scenes with LaFonda is truly like a star of this movie. I feel like the actress playing her, she has this level of like, you just absolutely buy into the fact that this woman is just randomly like so charmed by this dude, in spite of the fact that, like, specifically probably because he's like, again, he's got that dweeby quality to him, but he totally just owns it.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because I think if this movie were to came out nowadays, there'd be so much like discourse, quote unquote, on like Kip and LaFonda's relationship. The fact that like he's a nerdy white guy and she's like a quote unquote black chick who's like very, oh, I'm black, and like the fact that Kip has like the whole like, like get up at the end of the movie. I just appreciate it's. I'm glad this movie came out when it did, because I feel like if such a movie came out nowadays, it would be so unfortunate, the kind of conversations, and I think this is such a movie that when characters go on to their unique paths and all that, there's no sense of like, oh, this is like a particular cultural point or a statement about a certain part of society or whatever. These are just people that have their idiosyncrasies and they're just kind of going about their day. And it's kind of just the movie just kind of in the anime structure is just like, oh, it's just like imagine you take like a documentary crew and just follow these people in this small town in Idaho.
I feel like Kip and LaFonda, like I honestly don't even really think it has all that much to do with race. If you like, I truly think it's more of just like an opposites attract kind of thing. You know what I mean?
I get that's
I know you get that, but I'm just saying, like, I agree with you that, like, in a modern context, people would be having that discussion, but really, it is just like, you know, for a second she steps out off the bus in those high heels and everything, and you know, you probably get the sense that she is very different from Kip just based on the name, but I don't know, I really love that whole subplot. And like I said, like, one of my favorite scenes is just when LaFonda is just interacting with Napoleon, you know, like, and she's just being so polite with him, and she's like genuinely charmed by him.
Yeah,
and I don't know, there's just such a wholesome quality to her character.
No, because I think in another movie, like the humor would be like, oh, this girl would be so sick of Napoleon's shit, and then that's the humor of it is like he keeps like annoying her, and she.
But it's like totally the opposite. Like I feel like she's just like so charmed by how weird and quirky this family is.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the broader point about how like this movie is like. There's really no such thing as weirdness. It's just like people have their, you know, things that make them unique. And it's just kind of everyone is, and because of that, like if people recognize that and just vibe with it, you know, most people tend to have a good time. And for the most part, there's really no heavily antagonistic or like bad guy characters besides the Popper kids. Like they're not like a main like force of like, of like pressure or stress on like Napoleon.
They honestly, the way I would describe them is they just kind of like exist within the school's ecosystem. Like they aren't really direct antagonists.
Mm-hmm. There's like no, I mean, there's a clique, but it's not like a clique that dominates.
Well, you get the sense it really is just like Summer, Dawn, and then I forget the name of the girl that goes to the dance with Napoleon. I think it's Tina, right?
That's Tina.
No, yeah. You get the sense that it's literally just those three, right?
No, isn't Tina the Paka?
Oh no, I'm sorry. Oh my God, you're right. Tina is the llama. Jesus Christ, I should have known that. Wow, I feel dumb.
You just call the girl a fat lard.
I'm terrible. Okay, Trisha is who I'm thinking of. Yeah. Anyways. I'm sorry, that was dumb. So let's talk about my personal favorite side character in this movie. And once again, Rohit, I feel like truly, more than any other character, I feel like if you were to try and do a character like this nowadays, it would be so problematic, but somehow in this movie, it just works. Uncle Rico, man, he is such. If anyone is an antagonist in this movie, it is definitely him. And yet, I feel like his whole kind of like Arrested Development storyline and the literal time machine stuff that we'll get into, it honestly does give him an air of tragedy about him. Honestly, more than a lot of other characters, in spite of the fact that he is clearly like the biggest jerk in this world.
Yeah, the more I think about it, it's like, man, if Uncle Rico, if this movie were to be made in today's politics and culture, Uncle Rico would not be endearing.
No, but I feel like there is something about him that is endearing, though.
No, I think, because I think he represents, I think when we talk about like everyone's sort of weird and out there, the thing is that out of all the characters, Uncle Rico is kind of the most like, relatable or the most humanizing in terms of
he does have like the most kind of sympathetic backstory.
Yeah, and the thing is, he's kind of out of all the characters, he's the one he's the character that's most likely someone that we know in our lives, or unfortunately may have been that person that's like, oh, just stuck in our ways or being nostalgic or whatever. And the thing is that like I think the way they play Uncle Rico's character, he doesn't do anything that's like outright like malicious, or just outright like dangerous or violent to anyone. Like he gets in a scuffle with like Napoleon or whatever, but it's never anything too serious. Like I mean, the fact that Napoleon just punches like Uncle Rico hard in the stomach, and he's just like really feeling the hit as Napoleon. That I think makes Uncle Rico, because Uncle Rico is not like, he is not even over the hill, he's over the like mountain like guy,
right.
that like is wanting to live his glory days, and the world just doesn't allow him to, and he's just trying to get by and just find some level of meaning or purpose to him, and things kind of go a little awry to where Napoleon has to kind of go like do his own thing to beat his own drum. But Uncle Rico, like he never does anything that like completely upsets the balance. Maybe like he made Deb think that like Napoleon was maybe a shallow guy, but like that's not really something Napoleon has to do much effort to overcome. Like after the dance, like everyone,
I would say maybe the Starla thing is the closest he gets to being a homewrecker. But even then, it's like Rex Kwon Do. He's a man who knows his woman and trusts his woman. I get to go home to Starla at night. I'm sorry. I love the whole
I just love the image of like Uncle Rico taking 2 frying pans and putting it in front of
It's just Starla just clearly looking super uncomfortable about the whole thing.
Oh yeah, I think that another thing I think is like Uncle Rico, like he tries to be like a smooth player, but he's not like wanting to like hit on, or I mean he like the part of it is just more like he's putting on an act to like sell like plastic products like Tupperware. Right. And that makes it slightly tragic, but also really funny. That it's not like he thinks he has a chance to like get with these girls. It's like he's trying to act like how he was in high school just to make a living. And because it makes him some level of money, it's like, oh, like clearly, like the more I do of this, the more things work out my way. And I think that's just kind of part of that psychology that's really fascinating to explore, dramatically to a certain extent, but really just for humor and comedy is just great.
Mm. All right, let's see. Where do you want to go next?
Gosh, where do we go? It's like I'm trying to think of like I will say, rewatch the movie. So I actually a while back have you ever watched the Napoleon Dynamite animated series?
I've been I think I watched maybe 1 or 2 episodes when it was airing. I have been meaning to binge the whole thing, but I don't know where it's streaming.
No, I actually watched the whole thing, and it was a really interesting experience. And thinking back to like the cartoon versus the movie, the cartoon, not because it's the animated series, it's a lot more like out there, like because it's an animated animation, you can do a lot more. And I think in watching the movie, I really was surprised and didn't realize that like the grandma isn't really a big part of this film.
No, she's got like maybe like 2 or 3 scenes.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say one of the most quotable lines in the movie for me is, "Knock it off, Napoleon! Make yourself a dang quesadilla!" Because you can just tell, like, the palatable frustration in that woman's voice, Like, yeah. I feel like if, of all the characters, she is definitely the one that is most sick of dealing with Napoleon's shit. And you get that just through very little screen time.
Oh, yeah.
God. All right. Let's see. I guess we should probably touch on some of the set pieces.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, God. Let's talk about Deb, because I feel like, first of all, Deb has 3 of the most memorable lines. They're all like, I don't think any of them are things she says. It's just stuff that's directed at her. Number 1 is, of course, the iconic, "Your mom goes to college."
Oh, man. I think I know one of the other 2 lines.
For me, one of the most quotable lines is, "I see you're drinking 1%. Is that because you think you're fat? Because you're not. You could be drinking whole if you wanted to." It's just like, that is like, to me, like one of the ultimate like cinematic like flirt fails, right? It's just like the ultimate, just like, no,
It isn't a flirt fail. It is kind of actually endearing to a certain extent.
it's a little endearing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, probably one of the more famous moments with Deb, and this was pulled from real life, by the way. This is a scene that actually Jared Hess in his high school days did hear a very Napoleon-esque character. I assume that was based on Napoleon. Actually said this line: "I like your sleeves; they're really big." So what do you think of Deb just overall? I feel like she's also, again, she's very much a straight man in her own right. Like, I feel like the fact that she's trying to start her own business is maybe her biggest quirk, but also obviously pretty endearing in its own right. It's just, she does kind of have a hyper fixation on it.
I think the only thing that makes her quote unquote quirky is like maybe not even the bracelets or like the craft stuff. It's like her, like when she's directing people on certain poses for pictures.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. She gets a little bit too into her work. She takes her work a little bit too seriously.
But it's also kind of endearing because, like, I think I really wonder if Jared Hess, like, that he took a lot of inspiration from, like, you know, in high school, you go to, like, before the first day of school or whatever, you get your, like, photo taken. And maybe like that aspect that he was inspired by like a certain overzealous photographer.
Right. I could see that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And just Deb's whole arc with Napoleon. I do like how there's never even an ounce of tension in regards to like Pedro going to the dance with Deb and, you know, like any sort of like, he stole my woman. You know, basically all Napoleon says is like, you're lucky. And I like that the three of them can pretty much just be platonic friends for the most part. I think the ending implies like maybe there's a spark of romance, but I don't know. I also think the ending, especially with the ending on a high five instead of like a hug or a kiss or something, you know, the high five, that to me does kind of symbolize like this is going to be the start of a really fulfilling platonic friendship, which okay, I don't know if you know this about me. I don't know if you've heard me go on about this. Is kind of like a reoccurring thing with me. It's one of the things that I try and champion as much as I can. Media needs more platonic male-female friendships. I feel like we need to normalize that. I strongly advocate for it whenever I see it. Not saying that there could be romance in Napoleon and Deb's future. I'm just saying that the vibe I get from them is more supportive friends than anything else.
Yeah, I can sort of see that, but I feel like for me, the Uncle Rico scene and like Deb being hurt by it, and then Napoleon getting mad at that, I feel like that's not. I feel like that sort of conflict kind of shows up for like romantic or almost verging romances. And I think with the high five thing, I think with the fact the way these characters are idiosyncratic and you know have their own cuckoo land or whatever, I feel like a high five is sort of like their way of doing like a hug or a kiss.
I never really thought about it like that, but yeah, you could be right. I could see that.
Yeah.
All right. One thing I do want to touch on, some of the music choices in here. I think that this is the ultimate use of the White Stripes. We're going to be friends.
Yeah, the soundtrack is the Napoleon Dynamite soundtrack is just banger after banger. Like
it really is. Yeah. I love the needle drops, but I also love the actual score too. As quirky as it is, just like you know, it almost kind of reminds me of like a like the Rugrats score or something. You know what I mean? How it's kind of got that sort of like almost like a free flow kind of jazz quality to it.
It's very much like the score is kind of like something you would hear in like a 70s movie.
Totally. Dare I say a 70s porno movie? Right? It's true. It's got that vibe. It's got that vibe.
Not the porn.
I'm not even saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying it's an artistic choice.
Oh man.
I feel like that kind of adds to the awkwardness. You know what I mean?
And I guess also like the set design, it kind
I
of
want to talk about the set design because the set design is definitely an important element of the movie.
Yeah.
Specifically, I love the pastel colors in the high school. On the lockers and stuff. I should have looked into this. I didn't really find if that was just how the high school looked. I wouldn't be surprised if they went in and did some colors, did some painting on the lockers and stuff to really give it a very aesthetically pleasing design. Because honestly, I feel like I never really noticed how much the colors in this movie just pop, like the pastels and stuff. Like really, when people think of this movie, they like visual aesthetics are far from the thing they think about. But I mean, compared to something like let's say Clerks, for example, I do think that some of the shot composition and color choices and stuff in this movie are very on point.
Especially the opening of the movie with like the credits.
Which was the last edition, by the way. That was the that wasn't even included in film festivals. In film festivals, the movie just opened with the bus scene, and then when you see Napoleon Dynamite written on his desk, that's supposed to be like the title card. But that opening sequence, though, that title sequence, I feel like it's a perfect way to just set the mood and set the vibe, and just the artistic direction is just so on point.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then, of course, just all the real world like locations, all the farms and cornfields and stuff. What do you think of that random, just terrible work day that Napoleon has with the chickens?
Oh, and the fact that I love, for me, the funniest part was like he counts all his change. It's like $6.
$1 an hour. Very much reminds me of The Simpsons. Like, there you go, young man. 2 quarters, and you earned every penny. But no, I that scene is one of my favorite scenes, just because I feel like it very much represents like how shitty a first job can be, and like the lack of direction. For example, I love the whole bit with the talons, Rohit. I love it. The chickens have sharp talons. Boy, I don't know what you're talking about. And then just the lunch, just the very, very like shabby lunch with the egg whites, and the guy just like mumbling almost to himself, like, "Oh, over there, that feeling."
He's like Idaho Boomhauer.
Exactly. It's so authentic, though. I mean, like I said, coming from a farming town myself, I very much know people like that. Like, that guy is honestly one of the most realistic people in the movie, in spite of the fact that he seems like he would be a caricature.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they just plucked that, if that guy was just an actual Idaho farmer that they just plopped into the movie. I really wouldn't be surprised about that.
That would be great. So I have a question for that scene where they displayed the food or whatever food that was there. For the sandwiches, were they egg salad sandwiches?
So I got the sense that I don't know what was actually in the sandwiches. I got the sense that it was probably like turkey or tuna. I don't know. But I got the sense that the actual eggs were basically like, the equivalent of like how Rocky drinks the raw eggs.
Yeah.
That was kind of what I got. I'm allergic to eggs, so that would not be a good lunch for me.
Oh man, you and Margot Robbie have something in common.
Oh, nice. That's interesting.
Yeah. So like for Birds of Prey, when there's like the bacon, egg, and cheese scene, so for the egg, they had ostrich egg instead of chicken egg.
Oh, that's weird. All right. So yeah, I mean, honestly, Rohit, I feel like in a lot of ways this movie speaks for itself. I feel like we've already kind of combed over a lot of it. Do you have any other major talking points or set pieces or anything that you think we should get into? We didn't really address the vote for Pedro stuff all that much.
Before we get into that, I do love how Napoleon gets to have a date with Trisha.
Oh God. There's a lot more where that came from. If you go to the dance with me, yours truly, Napoleon Dynamite.
I love how like Trisha's mom kind of forces
You know
her.
you're going to the dance with that boy.
Yeah, that's the one time Uncle Rico did Napoleon a solid. And it
But
was
you know what? I honestly kind of feel like it wasn't a solid just because, like, Trisha is just so obviously uninterested that, like, I genuinely feel bad for Napoleon to put her in that situation to begin with, if that makes sense.
true, but I guess Napoleon wouldn't have known that until he actually got to like take her to the dance, right?
I guess so.
Yeah.
I mean, it does kind of speak to that sort of like awkward teenage year, you know, like Rohit, I'll be honest with you, I still have no clue what women think of me. It will forever elude me. I will never get into a relationship unless a woman just straight up approaches me and it's like, hey, you, that one, I want you. And even then it'll be awkward. Like, that's just the kind of guy I am. But man, in high school, forget about it. In high school, Rohit, the difference was that I didn't have the self-awareness to know which girls were probably inherently just not going to be interested. You know what I mean?
Imagine being the guy in high school that had the self-awareness but didn't have an idea of how to fix it. I had to fix other issues. They had to wait till college or whatever. Ooh, that's I don't know. That's even worse. But no, I think what I appreciate is that even though Trisha wasn't interested in Napoleon, the fact that he went to the dance and then got to eventually dance with Debbie. Like, imagine if he just wasn't interested or just failed, that he wouldn't have gone to the dance and then he wouldn't have got to dance with Debbie. So it kind of works out, you know.
That's true. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Also, just I really love the shot of Napoleon and Deb dancing at the dance to Forever Young and the pullback. It's a genuinely good camera shot there.
Yeah, and it's like the song is just a good song, but it's not played as like, oh, this is to accentuate like the ending of high school adolescence. It's just like a song. Like, this
honestly, it accentuates the awkwardness more than anything else because it's such a hard on sleeve, earnest song, and all these kids are so fucking awkward.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not just Napoleon and Deb, literally everyone in that room. You know.
And the way they're dressed is like, oh yeah, they're not like. I think in a modern movie, it's like when kids go to prom, like they're like dressed to the nines and tux,
right, yeah.
And this is just like I could either get my dad's old suit or rent a tux, and then
go to the Goodwill.
Yeah. And I'm not wearing dress shoes. I'm just wearing like more clean sneakers.
All right. So anything to say on the vote for Pedro saga?
And I appreciate that, like, it all started because Pedro was looking at the posters of like vote for Summer and just like, oh, I want to run for president.
Yeah, it's a very low-key subplot. And honestly, I honestly think it's a little bit bizarre that t-shirt became like the main thing to come out of this movie. You know, especially when you consider it's not like the vote for Pedro thing is like the main plot of the movie.
No, not really.
It's probably the closest thing this movie has to a goal, quote unquote, but still, it's, you know, it kind of pops up like over halfway through.
And it's not the goal for like the main guy. It's a goal.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I do like how his cousins, just that one scene where the cousins like pull up to Dawn as he's hassling the kid, and they just give like a no kind of look.
That was really fun. They just didn't have they didn't have to get out of their car or meet or say things or pull a weapon. They just like give him a look, and then that just ended.
They're like the wholesome version of the Breaking Bad twins, right?
that is great.
Oh, God. All right. I don't know if I can top that observation, Rohit. Do we have anything else we need to get into?
Napoleon's journey to be to be the man with the moves. My goodness.
That dance scene. So yeah, John Heater, that was one of the main things that he rehearsed like over and over and over again. It was really like it was a really big thing for him to do it. And yeah, I mean it really just pops on screen, doesn't it? It's so like what I love about it is that it's not like it's especially well choreographed or anything. It's not like he's pulling off like very sophisticated moves, but it's just got such expression in it.
It's got pizzazz. I actually, before we get into that, I love that they have a club called the Happy Hands Club.
The Happy Hands Club, yes.
Yeah, it's like
that scene with the Happy Hands Club towards the. I love how Dawn is like again with Dawn. He's Dawn doesn't really say much throughout the movie, but I feel like he just has such funny reactions to stuff. Like, I love how he's like barely holding it together with the Happy Hands Club stuff, and he's just like he thinks it's so pathetic that Napoleon's involved in it. I love just the facial reactions that he has. He's a very memorable performance in spite of not really.
And the contrast to when like. Summer does like the Happy Hands thing, but it's with like a Backstreet Boys song, and they're dressed like they're not even dressed like super quote unquote slutty, for lack of a better term. They're just dressed in like cheerleader outfits.
If this movie was made nowadays, it would be like it would just drive up.
It would be the Mean Girls Christmas scene.
Yeah. Oh God. Yes. This movie would just be Mean Girls if it was remade today. Oh God, that would almost be like an interesting like thought experiment. Like, how could they fuck up this movie with a remake?
No. It'd be hilarious if like, I mean, there was the Mean Girls remake, but it's like it'd be hilarious if you took Mean Girls and Napoleon Dynamite and then shifted like the energies and vibes of those movies, but still have the same plot.
I could see that. Oh man. All right.
I didn't realize that like another thing I forgot was that like Napoleon trained for like dancing, and I thought when LaFonda gives her the tape recording, it's like, oh, it's the song. Oh, it's like, oh no, it's like a dance instructional video. And I love like how like their scenes are just like the doors not even fully, it's just slightly closed. You still get to see glimpses of like Napoleon like breaking a sweat as he's like exercising.
I just, again, one of my biggest fucking laughs that I get in this whole movie is when he starts the tape and the tape's like, "Are you ready to become a dance pro?" or something like that, and Napoleon's just like,
yeah,
oh God. Okay, holy shit, Rohit. Speaking of insanely memorable line deliveries that, oh my God, I would never forgive myself if we did not bring this up. Okay, this honestly might have to be the finale, okay? We have to talk about that fucking time machine scene. So, for me, there's a reason why I specifically referenced the crystals in the video description. Because for me, wait, I forgot to put in the crystals is the line of the movie for me. It's the line of the movie. It fucking kills me every time. I don't know what it is about it. It's just, it is so like hyper specific. Wait, I forgot to put in the crystals.
And like Napoleon is like hurting the groin, and then you go to, and there's this scene transition to like Uncle Rico, and he's kind of walking awkwardly. It is like, oh man.
Well, I could have told you that. Oh man. Just Kip, like, it totally works, Napoleon. You don't know what you're talking about. Like, just Kip being so earnestly, like, going along with whatever Rico is involved in. Oh man. Yeah. Oh, thank God I didn't forget about that, man. I almost did.
Oh my God. That reminds me. One of the funnier scenes in that. I mean, there's a lot of funny scenes, but like when Uncle Rico is with that couple and he hands the like plastic Tupperware to that guy, it's like, try and rip it. That
guy is like the true soy boy of the movie, man. He really is.
And Kip, he puts a plastic thing like behind the wheel of Rico's car, and he backs up and is like, "Dang it,
dang it!" All right. I feel like we've pretty much gone through all the memorable set pieces and stuff. Is there anything else that we're missing? I'm checking because again, I was close to wrapping this thing up without talking about that damn time machine. And Rohit, you don't even know, man. That shit would have kept me up at night if I would have forgotten to bring that up.
Oh, like I think like the whole scene of like Kip and Napoleon going to Rex Kwon-Do, and Kip coming up doing his like a sparring thing. I love like trying to hit me, and like Kip just like does a kick, and like Rex like
just like the Donkey Kong like slap on the back.
And like, and after the class was like Kip, it was like, well, that was a waste of time or a waste.
That was a ripoff.
It was a ripoff, yeah.
God. Oh, and the commercial for Rex Kwon-Do, I will never get it seared out of my mind. The image of like the freeze frame of Rex at the end, but the finger is still waving. It's so good. It's so that little detail, you know. That's one of those like little film details that will never leave my mind.
Oh, like another scene it says like is when Napoleon's doing the milk testing or tasting, and it's like, taste the first one, tastes like bleach. There's bleach in it. And it's like just casually just says that. I love like as he drinks it, there's kind of like a close up to like his mouth, and like just like the two front teeth are the most prominent in that
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's so proud of himself in that scene.
Also, I love Napoleon's love for tater tots, and I think it's just like, because like, man,
I low-key think this movie brought back tater tots. Like, I think this movie pushed tater tots into the mainstream. I really do.
So me and my close friends from law school, we have a group text that's like. And the group text name is always Tater Tots themed. And I don't know if it was really inspired by like this movie, but I think like tater tots, there's such an interesting choice for like a random food item for Napoleon to be obsessed with. So I think growing up, it's like, at least for me in junior high and high school, for lunch, like tater tots was always like an item to get for food wise. And tater tots was never something you get necessarily like at a fast food place as often as you get like fries or whatnot, or even like mozzarella sticks or what have you. But tater tots, they're just kind of like very like middle America, or very like, oh, this is like high school or like just K to 12 kind of living. And I think that kind of speaks to like Napoleon Dynamite, while being, you know, of his age. There's some parts of his personality that like make him feel a little bit more younger, more childlike in a way.
True. Yeah, totally. All right. Well, Rohit, this has been a journey, my friend.
Indeed it has.
Any final thoughts? Any final observations?
I think Napoleon Dynamite, like the great King of the Hill TV show, they're both pieces of media that depict very, you know, far off rural parts of America and have a colorful cast of characters that have a lot of personality, a lot of heart. And for anyone that's never had the opportunity, and hopefully, you know, us spoiling the movie doesn't take every chance, watch this movie, rewatch it. It's an experience that, even though it was overexposed at an earlier point of its like lifespan, I think this movie does hold up comedically, and there's a good bit of heart. And I think this is a movie that is one of a kind, or one of a few of its kind. And in my mind, that kind of makes it a lot more special in that respect. That's a testament to the people who made this movie. It's a testament to John Heder. It's a testament to just kind of like when this movie came out, the cultural zeitgeist it occupied for a long while. So Napoleon Dynamite is, as one says, Dynamite.
It's pretty freaking sweet. I think that this movie really holds up, especially if you look at it through that lens of, that time capsule of the age where the internet was just starting to become a thing, but it hadn't quite reached the mainstream yet, and it's just a very specific time and place. The actual performance by John Heder is just iconic. The characters that populate the world are all just lovably quirky. The Mike Judge comparison is really on point, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's up there as far as just like memorable comedies of the 2000s. I do feel like it did get a little bit overexposed in its day. The massive vote for Pedro shirts and the people imitating him and just how much he would show up in parodies and stuff. It did get a little over. Like, I will say though, I when it comes to that kind of overexposure thing, I think the Borat stuff was a lot more annoying for me personally. Just everyone just being like, very nice, you know what
My wife,
my wife,
castle. Oh man,
yeah, Borat, man, I don't know. For me, there's something about just the Napoleon Dynamite's voice is just fun to do, right? Like, I feel like there's, like, for as overexposed as it was, and I totally understand how there are people that just fucking hate this movie because of the cultural impact it had. I totally get it. But Napoleon is just such a wholesome character, and it's such a fun voice to impersonate. Borat is a piece of shit human being, obviously. That's the whole joke of the character. So that kind of made the whole, like, let's quote everything Borat says a little bit weird in retrospect. You know what I mean? Just how quotable that movie became. This, I feel like, is a lot more wholesome. This, I feel like, is people, kind of like embracing the awkward, quirky side of things.
Napoleon Dynamite, you can show to like a young kid, and he can be able to appreciate, enjoy it. Whereas you show Borat, he'll become the most annoying kid on planet Earth.
If you show a young kid Borat, I think he'd have a lot of questions.
Why do you throw money at the Jews?
I would say Borat is probably the first movie I saw in theaters that had full frontal nudity in it. At least to that extent.
That's why Sacha Baron Cohen is a trailblazer.
All right. No, don't get me wrong. Borat's anniversary is next year, and I probably am planning on covering it. It is a cultural touchstone, much like this movie.
Borat came out 2006. Am I mistaken in that?
You might be right. I think you're right.
Let me see. Yeah, it was 2006.
Okay, thanks for the correction. All right.
No problem. So just 2 years away.
2005 was honestly not a great year for film. Just by and large. That was kind of like a transition year. But anyways, I digress. I don't know how many big anniversary things we're going to get in 1995 is different. 1995 there was a lot, but anyways, I digress. I'm sorry, folks. So big thanks to Little Blue and Cokehouse for joining us in the comments. Y'all rock. And see you guys later. I'm going to go eat some sweet. I don't even know where I'm going with that. I wanted to quote the ham thing. Okay, now I'm just Well, Rohith, take us out. What's a good Napoleon quote?
I have nunchuck skills, computer hacking skills, drawing skills.
It's a lion and tiger